Hi, my name is Liana, and today I'm going to be talking about the topic of anti-pancreatic cancer effects of turmeric-derived curcumin. So you can see in this background image this bright orange powder-like substance, and also around it this root plant that is of the same color. So this root plant here is the plant that turmeric comes from, and turmeric is a spice. So to give you a little bit more information on what curcumin itself is, it's a compound that's found in turmeric, and turmeric is derived from this root plant called curcuma longa, which is typically found in East India. And so the way that you get the isolated curcumin compound from the plant is to extract it from the root, and that is also how this spice is created as well. So turmeric, if you're not already familiar with it, it's typically used in South and Southeast Asian cuisine. Particularly, you'll see it a lot in Indian foods. And it's also used as a natural coloring in mustards, butters, cheeses, and curry powders, among some other products, because you do see that it has a very bright color. And in this particular video, we're going to be looking at how it's associated with some health effects, but in this video we're going to be looking at particularly how it might have some kind of anti-cancer effects. So you can see here that I have included an image of the compound itself of curcumin. So as far as the anti-cancer effects go, particularly we're going to be looking at pancreatic cancer. So to give you a little bit more background on what pancreatic cancer is and its importance, you can see here that pancreatic cancer is also known as pancreatic adenocarcinoma, and it's a relatively common cancer type, with it being the 14th most common, and the incidence rates have actually been increasing. In this image here on the right side here, you can see it's looking at the period between 2001 to 2020, and the new cases as well as deaths among both males and females have been increasing pretty consistently. So that's pretty concerning, especially because pancreatic cancer has a very poor prognostic outcome, with it being the 7th highest cancer mortality rate. So that means that among all the different types of cancers, the people who get it, they tend to die the 7th most. And in the people who do actually recover and they go into remission, actually 80% of them end up relapsing within 2 years. So that's definitely just shows you how brutal and just like scary this cancer type is, and the need for any sort of thing that can help with it. So that's why we're going to be looking at this primary research question, which is, does curcumin and turmeric exhibit anti-cancer effects, particularly pancreatic cancer? And if so, how? So we're going to be analyzing a couple of different studies and the evidence found in them to see whether or not curcumin is actually useful or, shows good potential for being used in pancreatic cancer treatment. So the first study we're going to be looking at is titled Phase 2 Trial of Curcumin in Patients with Advanced Pancreatic Cancer. This was published in 2008 in the Clinical Cancer Research Journal. So this study, the main point of it was just it was more of a general study, sort of, just to see how curcumin affects people who have advanced pancreatic cancer biologically as well as clinically. So they found that this cancer antigen, CA125, ended up being reduced. And so to explain a little bit of what CA125 is, it's a protein that's typically elevated in cancer patients. So when they administered orally curcumin to these patients who had advanced pancreatic cancer and they saw the reduced levels, that was definitely a really good sign that it was having some sort of positive effect on cancer regression. However, a big issue that was found with this study that kind of prevented the curcumin from reaching its true potential was that there was very poor oral bioavailability, meaning that a lot of the actual compound, when it was being administered orally, wasn't actually able to be utilized in the body. But even given that situation, that issue, this definitely does show a promising result for curcumin. So it was significant enough that definitely curcumin shouldn't be written off. Outside of this CA125 level, they also saw some increase in stable disease as well as tumor regression. So when we're talking about tumor regression, it's also, in this case, they refer to it as lesion size. But you can see, based on this image here, this is the lesion size beforehand in the pancreas, and this is after. So you can see a pretty significant reduction in the size here. And the period of time between these two images was 2 months after starting curcumin, and it was a 73% decrease in size. Next thing I want to talk about is this transcription factor nuclear factor, KB, also known as NFKB. So this is referenced a lot when it comes to the cancer and curcumin, because this past study that I just showed you, as well as some other ones, have shown that curcumin can inhibit the expression of this particular protein. So the reason why this protein is so significant is because it's linked with cell proliferation, invasion, angiogenesis, metastasis, suppression of apoptosis, and chemoresistance in multiple tumors. So these are all factors that are really negative towards cancer. Like they're things that can really help increase the severity of a cancer case and causing cancer to occur and become worse. So when they found in these studies that curcumin can inhibit this particular protein, that was definitely really promising that it could just overall improve clinically people who have cancer. So to go back a little bit to about the poor bioavailability, there ended up being a potential solution to that issue where there was this product called curcumin that was created, which was a kind of like a more concentrated version of curcumin that would improve the bioavailability when orally administered. So they tested this in this study called a phase 1 study investigating the safety and pharmacokinetics of highly bioavailable curcumin in cancer patients. So they developed this curcumin using microparticle and surface-controlled drug delivery system, and they found in rats that it had a 30 times higher bioavailability. So if replicated in humans, that would be really, really useful for improving the effects that we saw in that first study. So we can see here that in this study they had 2 different types of groups, a level 1 and level 2 group, that's with level 1 having lower dose than level 2. So you can see here, this is the plasma curcumin concentrations. on this chart here, and you can see both in level 1 and level 2 that we are seeing a much higher concentration of curcumin in blood among even this lower dose of 200. So this shows that curcumin is actually effective at increasing the amount of curcumin in the blood. So then we get to the idea of curcumin and gemcitabine. Gemcitabine is a drug. It's the current standard drug that's used for pancreatic cancer. And honestly, it's really like the only drug that has shown to be consistently effective in some way. However, considering the still high mortality rates, it's not effective enough that pancreatic cancer isn't a very, very deadly disease. So the way that gemcitabine works is that it disrupts DNA synthesis, and it also would induce in apoptosis in these mutated cells. However, like I mentioned before, the outlook is still not great even being treated with it, with a less than 10% tumor response, and also there's some issues with there being resistance to chemotherapy and also just resistance to the drug itself over time. So it's really important to find any sort of compounds or substances that can either work better than gemcitabine or increase the effects of it. So that's how we get to this study. Curcumin potentiates anti-tumor activity of gemcitabine in an orthotopic model of pancreatic cancer through suppression of proliferation, angiogenesis, and inhibition of nuclear factor Kb regulated gene products. So for this study, they did both in vitro studies and in vivo. In vitro meaning in the lab, in vivo meaning in live test subjects. In this case, it was rats. So in vitro, they found that in all 4 of these different cell lines tested, there was an increase in apoptosis. So that's programmed cell death. And in the live studies, in vivo studies, they found that the tumor volume in the rats that had pancreatic cancer became significantly lowered. So the size of the tumors was much lower in the rats that had both gemcitabine and curcumin compared to the rats who just had curcumin and the rats who just had gemcitabine, as well as a control that didn't have anything. So these results are illustrated on this right graph here, and you can see in this curcumin and gemcitabine group that the tumor size is significantly lower consistently compared to all of these other groups. So given those 3 different studies I outlined, going back to the question of does curcumin and turmeric exhibit anti-cancer effects, particularly pancreatic cancer, and if so, how? It does. There's definitely a lot of really good evidence out there that curcumin can be used in pancreatic cancer treatment as a way to aid in it and make it better. So it's primarily through its inhibition of this NF-κB protein, and the creation of that curcumin product definitely helped alleviate one of the main issues of it having poor oral bioavailability. So definitely there can be more research done here and more clinical studies on especially live patients, human patients, but definitely considering the evidence found on that increased apoptosis in the cell lines and the decreased tumor volumes in the rats that were tested, this definitely is very promising, and it does exhibit anti-cancer effects.